Lumberjack's hiring note shook in the heat. Then a widow and 3 small shadows reached the porch. Heat flickered on the boardwalk like water on tin roof. Resin sweetened the noon air. A warning shot punched dust by the loading yard, and grit leapt in a small ring. While the barrel already slid down to safe at the pebbles, the note of the shot lived a heartbeat against clapboard walls, then fell away, leaving only flies and the tick of a wind vane. Jonah Pike tucked the pistol back, holstered muzzle low, shoulders wide, from cross-cut work vest of brown wool, creaking over a faded denim shirt hat, brim a straight shadow. The paper he had nailed shook on the post with the same tremor as the heat. A single rectangle in charcoal letters: Cook, wanted for Sawyer's Notch, timber camp wages and board apply in daylight. The last tack still warm under a thumbnail when the stagecoach bench scraped and a canvas top wagon sighed to a stop. 3 small figures slid down from its step close to a woman in a sky-blue calico dress, narrow belt leather, cracked by sun-long braid, laid quiet against spine boots, scuffed from road dust. She walked as if the street itself tested resolve, skillet in one hand, held like a seal, not raised like a threat. The 3 shadows matched the pace, the tallest girl, steady eyes, the middle boy carrying a twine-tied bundle, the smallest child taking 2 steps for every grown stride. The porch of the mill office took their weight with a wood groan. The skillet kissed the rail with a clean iron note. Nothing said for a moment. Air, the color of brass, just moved the paper on the post once, then stilled again. The event stood complete for every eye along Main Street. Jonah finished his breath and gave the space to let it be seen: a lumberjack hiring at noon, a widow answering in full view. No secrets, no alley deals. The cross-street hands paused under the shade of a freight awning. A teamster let reins slack a boy near the hitch. Watched with his mouth half open, then remembered his chore and backed away. The widow laid a palm on the skillet rim, as if feeling a memory of heat. The other hand gathered the little ones into a neat line. Names arrived, measured like beans poured to cuplark. The eldest Bram, the boy Fay, the small one, Mother Mira Hale. The voice held a steady, plain tone. The paper said, Cook wanted answer coming at noon. The time has arrived. The porch kept still. Pigeons shifted on the roof slate and cooed. Jonah took in the braid. The travel grit at him, the eyes not looking for pity, only an even trade, a trial. Then kitchen at Sawyer's Notch tonight. Warm food, quiet order, no shouting at the stove. A nod answered. He pointed with a peavy handle toward the yard. No flourish, just direction. Wood skids lay slanted near the ramp, ox chains. Slack grease bucket capped to keep flies out. Cross-cut blades hung on pegs like slivers of moon. Farther off, a pump clacked over the trough. The cookhouse at the edge of the timber yard sat honest boards, tin pipe angled skyward, iron stoves, squat and waiting shelves almost bare except salt. A sack of coarse flour, a chipped crock of lard, a string bag of field onions, a jar of dried pepper pods, a dented coffee pot. The work began without horns or trumpets. Sleeves rolled no complaint to the empty pantry. Fire built with split juniper tinder, shaved thin with a pocket knife flame coaxed to breath. The skillet warmed to a soft smoke whisper. Beans in water, first onion cut with a quick rock of the wrist peppers, crushed between cloth folds, a pinch of salt, a spoon of grease. The dough for biscuits worked in small circles with a cool touch. Not heavy, not slow, the eldest sorted kindling by length. The boy stacked sticks, shoulder to shoulder like soldiers. The little one wiped a table with a rag, wrung dry. The room gained shape by inches. A dipper placed on the barrel rim, not lost inside a knife, laid spine to the board. Not edged down a rope, coiled right side out, not tangled. The smell changed to promise hot flour, tallow cinnamon hint from dry bark that had seasoned near the stove months ago. Men drifted to the jam, ready to offer jokes, then forgot the jokes when the air moved over them with steadiness. The first platter left the stove and found the bunkhouse table, tin plates, warm knives, clean mugs, set upright coffee, strong enough to stand a spoon. Voices kept round and low, a card deck stayed stacked for once. Jonah held to the threshold, half in sun, half in shadow, counting the rhythm that kitchens give to hungry yards. The leather of the vest eased a fraction, breath followed. Then trouble rolled in, not a shout, not a fist. Slow trouble, the kind that ruins ankles and hope. A timber sledge on skids, weighted loaded with milled offcuts, a half-barrel of pitch tins stacked by habit at noon. The sun slid higher, grease went silky, a chock under one runner, shifted a whisper, barely a sound. Wheels not round but runners. Slick started a slow creep toward the cookhouse step. Faye sat on the lower plank tapping a tune with 2 spoons. The sledge lined itself on a shallow grade, perfect to aim for the smallest set of boots. No one yelled. Mira saw the drift. Same moment Jonah straightened. The warning shot earlier had taught his hand. Calm, not panic now. There would be no second shot, only work. The widow snagged a grain sack from a nail, dipped it one swipe through the trough water, darkened the burlap in an instant. The sack swung under the runner like a loop. The wet, rough weave bit wood. She pressed down full-weight ribs, set the sledge slowed, but still came. Her boot found a spoke gap in the front cap. She leaned shoulder steady, not a wrestling match, a persuasion move. The nearest post took a turn of rope in a blink. The rope circled twice. She planted her heel against the bottom knot, pulled with the hip. The sledge pivoted a hand's width enough to let the grade bleed off speed. Jonah arrived with a PV not charging, just placing iron beak under the runner to lift a finger's span. Lift, hold, breathe together. The wood groaned, then stopped still in its tracks. Dust fell back to earth. Faye blinked, then returned to the spoon rhythm as if the ground itself had agreed to keep time. A man at the door, who had prepared a laugh, shut his mouth quietly. The wet sack left stripes on the runner. Pitch tin did not spill. The barrel stayed up, nobody broken, no fire, started safe. The yard let out a shared slow exhale. No applause, only work resuming like a creak after a rock is removed. The meal end of day came. Honest beans carried body biscuits, browned perfect bottoms to top, flipped with a knife, so old the handle shone like riverstone. Coffee poured without apology in tin cups. The bunkhouse settled to voices that did not jab. Lark, Bram, and Faye ate on a crate, turned sideways near the warm stove out of boot traffic. Mira stood near the ladle, back to the window, watching the trio without hovering posture of a captain who has weathered long wind when plates thinned to a last scrape. Jonah set a clean cup on the table, a gesture not quite thanks, not quite order. The agreement formed with no speech. Stay through sunrise, feed the sawyers and teamsters. Night cut gang, 2 payment when the first raft of logs rides the river gate. Discipline outside the door. His charge, steadiness inside the door. Hers nod once the trade held the skillet wiped with salt-folded rag, not a scratch left on iron. The coffee pot rinsed, set upside down. Trivet checked, hairline cracker mark filed in Jonah's mind for a Smith next supply run. A list appeared from a small pocket sewn into dress lining. Not a letter. A ledger of counts: flour by head, sugar by spoon, water by quart, fuel by hour, penciled columns, neat in steady hand planning for the day. A cook might tend a sick child, and another hand would need a map to keep the line marching. Jonah read without touching, then looked toward the door frame, where boots of the 3 small shadows stood in a row. Toes meeting a single chalk line. Yes, order had taken a foothold. Evening slowed, lamps trimmed chimneys, rubbed clear with newspaper smoke stains, thinned the yard, wore bronze. A meadowlark carried high notes beyond the corral. Oxen lowed at the trough teams, stamped once, then settled the paper on the post outside. Still named the job wanted, but the answer already lived in the cookhouse. Yoke pins rattled faint from the pen. So Jonah walked a perimeter check along the fence, remembering coyotes 2 nights past. Imagining the route for the morning wagon up towards Sawyer's Notch, through switchback pine lanes, over shallow ford, under a hanging bridge rope. Braided winter tight spring rain had frayed crossbars to hair. Careful hands would be needed to bring supplies safe to camp. The thought did not sour, rather drew focus, the kind that holds a crew together. At first light dawn, colored the east with metal silver, then wheat gold smoke lifted thin from the cookhouse pipe. Again, biscuits appeared smaller this time, more numbers, fewer boasts. Eggs cracked into lard, coffee deep as canyon-shade hands ate without jabs or elbows. A large cutter slid his plate back for a second egg. Bram fought a grin, lost the fight, then straightened to serious again after bowls cleared floors, swept water hauled twice rather than once. Jonah found a patch by the pen that never grew grass, dusty for years, now held 3 shallow rows turned by spade. Sometime at first light, damp lay under the crumble, not weeds in tension. Someone had decided a kitchen needs herbs near as breath. He traced the short furrows boot length to boot length, then looked back to the door where a dipper hung on its own nail broom. Bristles kept up rope coiled clean, the picture of a yard choosing to live right. He checked the harness on the freight wagon for the ridge run, leather-oiled buckles true spare, pin tied with rawhide. A coil of new rope packed a canvas tarpaulin folded cross-cut in its sleeve. Peavy lashed to the side rail mire on the Ford would grab if given slop, so plank runners were strapped under the bed. As skids, Faye tested her spoon tune again, then tucked both into a pocket like treasure lark, gathered a small pouch of seeds. Bram took pride in a box of nails counted twice. Supply crates thudded onto the wagon bed one by one, coffee kettles nested skillet, seated in straw, 2 lanterns checked wick-trimmed chimneys clear. Safe people called goodbyes that did not sound like endings, more like a rhythm shift for a longer song. Jonah set a hand on the front rail, a signal to mount up. The team snorted. Leather sang the first foot of travel touched the street. The hiring note still fluttered on the post, though less from wind, now more from footsteps passing with purpose. Noon had started with noise, a shot into dust, action framed safe now. Movement rolled out of town toward Timbershade, where saws waited to bite, and a kitchen would keep hearts steady through the bite. The road opened pale ahead under high sun, the porch behind already cooler in memory. The turning had begun. The wagon left Pine Hook crossing with a dry rattle of chains. Mules leaning into collar leather sun, straight up resin sweet across Black Sparrow, draw the ridge road cut to switchbacks. Where slate shows its teeth, the first ford came, shallow water, green over stones, wheel hubs barely wet. Jonah walked the lead rope down the cobble. Careful steps, boot soles feeling for round rock, while Mira kept the brake lever snug. The children counted aloud to steady the team. A low song, more rhythm than tune, the far bank gave a soggy pull. Then let go. Wheel rims climbed, dust shook free the hanging bridge. Weighted higher on the trail rope, braided winter-tight planks thrown new in spring rain had lifted 2 of them on the far third, where crossbars had split to hair. The crew had lashed a warning rag weeks back. Now the strip hung dead of color, sun-bleached to bone. The wagon halted before the span. Jonah gave the deck. A test hop, knee, soft ears open, timbers talked in dry clicks. Not groans, the team faced the gap ears gone forward. Mira set crates tight across the bed, skillet nested in straw coffee kettles, muffled under canvas lantern chimneys wrapped to keep glass from chatter. A coil of new rope sat ready. Peavy lashed to the rail buckles, checked again. Rawhide ties doubled a breath, then the step. The first plank took weight. The rope handrail twitched, no drama, only facts. The second step followed. Then the fourth plank, where rain had bitten, gave up the top board with a short sigh. A corner dropped a quarter hand. The wagon bed tilted a finger's width. Not disaster yet enough to ruin a hub. If panic chose the moment, Mira already had the tarpaulin by one corner. Bram passed the free edge lark, braced a knee to the rail. Faye touched the mule necks with 2 small palms, whispering breezy words that belonged in a kitchen, but worked on beasts. The canvas slid under the low wheel like a tongue. The wetting bucket went down, fast water. Up rope under knot, pulled flat against a crossbar. The wheel rode the new slick like a sled. Jonah lifted the opposite runner with Peavy beak, just enough so the load found level again. The team stepped 1 more plank, then 2, then the far beam. The whole thing settled to quiet, as if the bridge agreed to hold its breath for honest work. A gust hit when the last hub left the hazard boards, banged, then stopped. The canvas came back, painted with pitch dust. The bucket swung empty. The road opened into shade where Sawyer's Notch lived, between straight trunks and the long whine of a sawtooth on iron. The camp watched the wagon roll in with eyes set for judgment. Log cutters at the grease stump stacked their knives in a line. Not a pile oxen at the yoke lifted heads once. Then returned to cut. The cookhouse leaned on a skim of level ground iron stove, squat door, tight shelf space, small but ready. The first fire of camp day rose with juniper shavings. Kettle went on beans found, water flour turned to quick rounds on a board, salted edges puffed into honest biscuits, coffee strong enough to float a wish. Tin mug sat upright, waiting order, walked in by itself. Mira did not lecture the room about rules. The room learned by where hands placed tools, rope coils right side out, pegs holding crosscut blades like moon shards, broom bristles up, not down dipper on its nail, not drowning in the barrel. The long hold of the day began. Wind in the high boughs, the creek giving a glassy thread behind the skidway horses, shifting weight, then still again, sawdust lifting in small ghosts, then falling everything alive without hurry. The first interruption arrived in a coat too neat for a timber yard. A rail company factor rode a tidy bay into the rough circle by the office door. Leather folder under one arm, words smoothed by practice supply on credit, a promise of regularity. A clerk to keep books, a foreman to keep order. Eyes sliding past Jonah toward the cookhouse, where the new center of camp clearly lived. The line about improvements tried to sound like help, then landed like boot heel on a throat. Jonah let the pitch run down. The wind listened to the saw, then gave a reply. Flat as riverstone coin at palm goods at hand, kitchen remains, kitchen ledgers remain in camp hands. The bay horse blew once. The man smiled without teeth, then rode the boundary slow. The kind of slow that memorizes where rope lies and which tie holds the bridge rail. The kind of slow that keeps a thought for later. The work beat reclaimed the space. Afternoon took the light sideways. The second set piece came from the hill where the skid road turns past a shale outcrop. A top log broke chock on the high deck. The slither began not fast, not slow, a line of round weight heading for the yard with the angle to kiss the cookhouse corner and take a stove leg with it. A shout would have wasted breath. Jonah went up the slope with peavy underarm boots, choosing edges, not slick bits. One wedge tossed with a wrist snap bit. Nothing slid again. Another wedge found a seam but rode out. Mira saw the line. The children stood back in the safe rectangle marked in chalk earlier for lessons on where feet should root. During loads, the skillet hung at her side, but that tool belonged to heat. Not to slope, a short coil of chain lay by the ox-tack hook, and ring polished by hands. She had seen a wagoner in silver run loop steel like thread through spokes to make a stall. One time the memory arrived ready. The chain ran around a stubborn stump at the edge of the road, through the iron ring on the log end, back to the stump again. A mule collar pad stuffed under the chain to spare bark, a tug, a hitch. The last half-turn grabbed the log. Hungry teeth stopped bite, then held. Jonah reached the end with peavy iron, bit the wood. Finally the log rolled a quarter, then jammed where the chain wanted it. Braces reset, a chock reset, another chain pass set. The rest of the deck nuzzled the stopped piece like cattle joining a gate, not a roux in a hold. A save saw dusted the air again without panic. Camp eyes met camp eyes. The set of shoulders changed the factor at the boundary, learned nothing from faces because faces gave nothing away. Only hands returned to tools. Mira wiped palms on apron, salt into rag skillet cleaned dry. No grit, coffee poured, steady breaths, settled the creek, kept its thin shimmer by 8 minutes of clock hands. The yard looked like the same yard, yet every man knew a stove had been spared, and a day had been kept whole. The ledger came out at sundown, not the office ledger. The kitchen book counts in pencil flour per head, beans per hour. Wood by armload, water by dipper lark, wrote neat columns. Bram checked tallies. Faye drew a small line of mint leaves at the bottom for luck. Jonah placed his name on a corner as witness, not owner, then shut the cover with a press of palm that felt like a promise. The next morning walked in white and clean, smoke lifted thin again, biscuits smaller, faster, coffee deeper. The long middle stretch held frame without going dull, micro motion everywhere. Mule tail swishes saw carriage clacks, creak light, winks, an occasional shout, not angry, just distance a rhythm born for men to trust into the third day. The factor returned this time with another coat and a deputy who wore the badge like a pocket mirror. The talk sounded like paper wrapped, as weather improvement. A notice about the bridge load limits a claim of unsafe conditions, a suggestion of a company cook who would know paperwork for an inspection day set tomorrow. The subtext read, "Move the widow out." Remove the center that steadied the place. The reply landed quiet. Keep the badge clear of the saw path. Keep credit clear of the kitchen. The deputy measured the distance to Jonah's holster. Holster stayed quiet. Muzzle down, belt, leather creaked. No threat given, no fear offered. The deputy left a paper on the office door, then rode after the factor. Dust climbed over perfect cuffs. A crew meeting set itself at the cookhouse threshold. Not a speech, a map. For the next 24 hours, planks would be pulled from the bridge for replacement. Rawhide would lace the rails. 2 new braces waited in the tool shed from winter work. Plank ends would be pegged. Not just nailed, dowels cut from scrapped sledge runners, all of it under sunlight with hands who had carried this camp through fire season 2 years back. Every step meant for safety to speak louder than any paper the long middle held again while the repairs began. Saw teeth bit, dowel pegs, hammers found true strikes, wedges sang the small song that straight tight wood sings when it agrees. Around mid-afternoon, a third set piece crested out of calm. A gust rolled down off the shale like a fist with no arm lifted. A hat off a head, knocked a loose tin at the grease stump, sent it skating toward the ditch with a clatter that spooked the team by the office. The bay horse from earlier had been tied with a knot, fit for a parlor, not a yard. The knot let go. The animal stepped back into the repair line, eyes white then grey. Jonah cut. The angle before panic could choose targets. Body turned sideways, hands low, voice low. The PV went down, the rope went up, knots true this time. Mira raised a strip of canvas again. Not to snap the air wild, just to draw eye from the shadows that frighten animals more than noise. Faye tapped a rolling beat on the porch rail spoon to wood a rhythm like a creak. Not a storm lark, shifted a barrel half-inch to take a wheel roll if one came. Bram set a chock in a quick square, the horse calmed enough to let breath back. The deputy's paper fluttered once on the office door, as if to admit wind knew more about conditions than ink. The factor did not return that evening. The bridge stood with 3 new planks pegged, not nailed, rails lined with rawhide, in double wraps. The inspection would find a structure better than morning had offered. The camp ate in a quiet that tasted like resolve. Beans gave body biscuits crisped, as if they had decided edges should carry courage. Coffee walked warmth from stomach to hands to faces. Jonah set a small iron brand on the table. Not a cattle mark. A maker's stamp pulled from an old toolbox, a circle divided by a pine sprig. The mark that once lived on crates from a sawmill. Long burned, that brand would go under the cookhouse shelf tomorrow. 1 press into wood to claim the room as camp heart. Not property for paper to shuffle. Mira looked at it and gave no speech again. Only put the skillet where the brand would face it daily. A thought moved between 2 workers without heat or haste. Keep the center still. The outer wheel can spin around it. Night hummed with the old sounds, water talking to stones, insects counting time far off. A coyote told a brief story, then shut up. The long hold stretched toward dawn without sag. The last beat of the part arrived near daybreak, when Lark woke at a small scrape by the herb strip mint. And fever, few lay crushed, not from a boot, more like a knife tip. A thin line in the dirt that said someone had tested the rows under stars. Jonah followed the line to the fence, found a rawhide tie nicked, not cut through. Yet the same tidy hand who rode a bay and smiled with no teeth had practiced in the dark. The discovery did not bring a yell. It brought a plan. The inspection would be public, the crossing would be public, the answer would be public. A heavy crate needed to reach camp anyway. A new boilerplate for the saw carriage crated at the freight house back in town. Weight that would test any bridge, even when honest. The plan set the next scene under sun in sight of whoever wanted, eyes full. A proof by action. not argument. The team would take the load at noon, when light makes lies thin. The rope would sing true. The pegs would hold a kitchen, would pour coffee in plain view. While the crossing happened, a tableau for a territory that understands proof better than paper. The camp turned to tasks with that quiet breath people draw before stepping into water that could be cold or could be clean. Either way, the step must land true. Noon stepped into Pine Hook Crossing like a judge without a robe. Sunlight square on the rope bridge, wind moving only enough to show truth, not enough to lie. The freight house crew slid the boilerplate crate onto the wagon bed, with skids greased by tallow, then tied cross with rawhide over the crate corners. Canvas under rope to spare the boards. Nails checked twice, pegs in belt pouches, a dipper hung from its nail at the cookhouse, because some steadiness belongs behind the eyes. Before a test begins, camp and town made a bright horseshoe along the street, the deputy at the front rail, badge not shining in anybody's face. The factor in a coat too neat sat his bay with Rain's short mouth in a line meant to say order, while the eyes measured for failure. Jonah Pike brought the team to the bridge head with PV lashed to the side rail vest, plain holster closed, muzzle down, hat brim straight. Not a swagger, a promise, mere a hail, walked the line once with palm to each rail. Rawhide laces new from last evening, double wraps drawn, tight knots dressed, so a child could read them without a teacher plank. Faces cleaned, 3 pegs to a board, dovetailed, not pounded, crooked faylark. Bram waited on the porch inside the chalk rectangle that said safe ground. A kitchen window open for air biscuits cooling on a board, coffee set deep and black. The deputy raised a hand. Small gesture, not command the kind towns follow because it does not ask too much. The wagon stepped forward. Hooves pressed the first planks. The bridge sang a low wood song. Wind took a tiny bowstring sound through the rope handrail. The crate stayed square to the world. The second plank accepted the weight. The third spoke its agreement. The fourth took the hub and gave back level. A jay screeched from Black Sparrow draw. Then the crosswind rolled off shale with a rude hand. A plank near midspan lifted a hair where spring rot had lived before last night's repair, and chose this noon to cough up a sliver. Not a break, not yet enough to invite panic, enough to invite slop. The crate kissed the wagon side and thought about sliding. The team stopped without yelling because the lines in Jonah's fingers did the telling, not the mouth. The PV iron slid free and went to the deck beak under the runner. The lever climbed a breath, the wheel rose, the canvas from the tool chest ran under the hub like a tongue. Wet sack followed one quick dip through the creek bucket, because a wet weave bites wood. The runner found the slick and waited. Mira's voice traveled low as creek water to the team, steady now. Good now. One more plank, not a chant, a count the way kitchens count. When heat must hold a temp, the factor nudged the bay 2 steps to the side to see closer. The bay rolled an eye and chose fear. The front shoe struck rope with a ring that meant problems. The deputy's palm flattened, open, muzzle down already. The peacemaker stayed leathered. Jonah snapped a warning shot into dust 20 hands from the bay. The bullet met gravel and bit no flesh. The sound shook, flies off the bay's ears, drew eye away from rope, not toward it. The horse breathed again, a rider far behind who had come to watch trouble. Remembered work at that sound and put both hands where they belonged on reins, with respect. The bridge took 2 more breaths of weight. The crate traveled 1 hand span, then another. The pegs held, the rails held, rawhide stayed true. The center of camp did its center work again without sermon coffee. Steam slid out the cookhouse window like a banner without letters. Wind steadied the last 5 planks, weighted level as a table not daring a wobble. The team walked the final length, the bed cleared the hazard. The far beam received iron and rope and resolve. At the same moment the bridge stopped singing, because songs do not outstay their welcome if built for honest purpose. Dust settled on the bay's shoulders and turned a coat into a coat instead of a statement. Jonah set brake lever tight. Myra set a chock and removed the wet sack before rot could start where it had no right to live, and the crate came to ground on straw with a sigh that sounded like a belly after bread. The deputy looked at the rails, the pegs, the knots, the crate, the wagon, the faces. then reached into a vest pocket and drew out a knife, thin as a lie, the same blade found by the trough days back. The hinge caught Son without gloating. The law wrote 2 lines in a small book, says a bridge stands safe, says a pump runs clean, says a ledger reads true. Then closed the book and lost interest in the coat. The factor tried a smile that reached nowhere, then let the bay turn a slow circle that meant retreat. Not parade dust, took his cuffs from perfect to human by the corner of the freight house. A child laughed at a dog because work had let childhood loose for half a beat. The crowd did not cheer, the crew simply took tools to pegs to drive each one a second time. Not superstition-proof a brand iron warmed in a shallow coal pan at the cookhouse threshold, not a cattle mark. A maker's sign pulled from an old crate that had survived a different fire at Sawyer's Notch. The pine sprig inside a circle reached heat. Jonah pressed it under the shelf once the wood took the shape with a smell like toast and sap. Mira touched the new mark with the back of a knuckle to feel warmth without stealing it. The deputy tipped 2 fingers to nobody in particular, said something small about daylight being a friend to pages and plank work, then rode for the rail spur where papers travel faster than men can breathe. Coffee passed hand to hand, tin to tin, crew to town, to freighter to teamster without label or sermon. A long hold of breath, let go like a gate hinge that has finally learned oil. The factor did not return that hour. The bridge settled to quiet the rope so still that dragonflies took it for reed. The crate lid came off, bolts freed in order. The boilerplate found its bolts on the saw carriage, and the iron tooth sang a new, louder note that said, the day belonged to work again. Not to opinion, evening brought wind from the west with rain inside it. Not much, just enough to dot the yard and shine the herb rose. Mint breathed loud for such a small plant. Feverfew stood like a line of little flags. Bread rose in the new oven. The brick door tested a palm and told a cook it was time. The round slid onto the table crust, singing hairline snaps the way. Good crust confesses life camp gathered, where light lay soft across boards. Faces went easy because no one had to hold a pose. A guitar with 2 strings replaced found a plain chord that does not ask skill, only honesty. The camp let it stand there a moment and did not chase it with talk. Jonah set the kitchen ledger on the table. Not to defend it, to honor it, counts crisp pencil, true to the dime water. By dipper wood, by armload flour, by head, and the names of those who signed witness, because in this country witness is a job, not a courtesy. Mira placed a small pouch of seed by the ledger, not a ring, not a ribbon, a statement of what comes next when hands do not twitch. The children slept in a neat row on the pallet near the warm stove, because Storms had been given jobs today and had gone home tired. Pine Hook Crossing breathed without hitch. Black Sparrow Draw answered with a nightbird call, and Sawyer's Notch lay still as a held hand. The last daylight gathered itself on the bridge rails and ran down the pegs like a final check, then went where light goes when it trusts tomorrow to wake the place. The story came to rest on that bright point with breath still moving through it, not a finish line, only the calm after a run that made sense, and a line drawn across a page to say this much was done in the open under sun, and nobody needed to hide work. That holds in sunlight does not shout because daylight already speaks enough for honest things. A camp that keeps ledger open and rope true invites strangers to bring eyes instead of rumors when the hard part comes. A place survives by the smallest choices tool laid right. Dipper hung clean, not dressed clear. Every rescue here looked simple, only because courage prepared it before noon when nobody watched. Those are the deeds that last in memory longer than a shot into dust. Subscribe to the Wild Frontier Tales, and then they build a home where danger meets its match without needing a witness.